Thank you everyone for watching my brand new video. Today we're going to be looking at the shocks and struts of your car. Now of course this is on a Grand Prix, but does apply to a lot of other cars. There's a few tests you can do for anything. Just a few things to kind of look at and a few things you can do. So I'm going to get right to the video, but before I do, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Alright, so when you're checking your struts and springs, the first thing you want to do is test drive your car. This is something you want to do often when you're just testing suspension components. And there's a few things you want to be looking for when you are test driving your car itself, especially when it comes to your struts and your springs. You want to be hearing for any particular noise. If there's any clunking or anything like that, could indicate a broken spring or anything like that. But you also want to be checking for if there's any type of play, I guess is the best word, in the accelerate on the suspension system. And what I mean by that is looking for things like accelerating squat, brake dive, and also sway in the steering. So I'm going to give you an example right now of accelerator squat. So I'm just going to get to a safe spot again, making sure you're in a safe spot when you're testing out your vehicle. So while you are kind of looking into this, you want to make sure that you're being safe. No one's going to get hurt. You're not doing this on the road. I'm actually at a parking lot right now, and I figured I'll start filming so I could talk as I'm driving to a safe area. So this is an example now of accelerator squat. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to give you two quick examples. And I just want you to look out through the back. Now, accelerator squat is when the car is balanced. If you accelerate and the car sits back under hard acceleration, that's why you got to be safe, because you don't want to be doing this on the road or anything like that. And if the suspension is good, the car should have very minimal. It's going to dive. Any car, even sports cars maybe, but pretty much any car. But if it squats back, so it sits back as you're doing it, even in high performance cars, and it's doing it more than you've maybe noticed from when you bought it, there may be a problem. And now watch, we're going to do it here now. So now if you look through the back, you'll see that it actually dipped, and you can see more of the back there. But as you see though, it didn't dip a lot, and then actually the suspension is in decent shape for my car. It actually is going to be changed soon. That'll be another time. But you can see that it dipped down. That's accelerator squat. Now we're going to do brake dive, and brake dive is when you brake really hard in the car. So let's again, you're looking at the car like this, and it dips forward when you brake. Again, if you see a lot of suspension is rough in the front or anything like that, it's in bad shape, the springs particularly, anything, the car will dip forward. So first I'm going to get to the spot. We're going to accelerate here, and we're going to brake. Now again, when you look out the back there, you can see that, for example, what you're looking at. Let me get right there. There we go. Right over here, all this you could barely see, but you can still see it. My brakes are in good shape. Suspension is also in decent shape as well. So it did dive, but not as much as a car that's in terrible shape. The next thing you're going to be looking for is sway. And what sway is when you're driving and you're going to be turning the wheel side to side, and you're going to be looking for the car to dip one way or the other. If everything is working well, there should be, especially if squat and dive is good, there should be very little sway too. But we're going to do that now. We're going to accelerate. You can see, of course, you need a balance surface. I'm turning the wheel side to side. Now, doing that, the car stayed firm, held to the ground very well, and there was minimal play in the suspension itself. But if you're getting where, if you're turning one wheel, especially if maybe you'll see it on one side, it's possible where you turn the wheel and one side sways in more versus the other. There's a problem somewhere in the system, and it could be your struts or your shocks that are playing up to that. So between these few tests you can do, it can give you a good feel already for the car. But there's a few other things, so let's get to that. With the driving test complete, it doesn't complete an inspection of your struts and springs. There is more to do. The next thing you'll do actually after you've done your driving test is you're going to do a general visual inspection. What you're looking for is sagging. And generally what I mean by sagging, for example, is just doing a comparison, comparing one side to the other side, and then going from one side to the back, and then to the other side. Now, with some cars, depending on the car, the distance between the tire here to here and for the front could be different. So that's not measuring the two and seeing a difference in numbers, not necessarily the case. But what you're also looking for is if you're seeing any differential in sag. What you really, at the very least, you're seeing is from one side to the other should look have the same type of measurement. Very, very minuscule differences in measurements. Sometimes it could be a slight wear, but it should be very little. And also in the front, same thing from side to side. And depending on the car, sometimes the distance between front and back will be the same. Now, the way to really do it, first off, the best thing is if you can go get a manual for your car, or even go online and find out what the height is here. But to be honest, that's not always easy to find on various cars, depending on the car you have. So even just something as simple as going to get a measuring tape, or any type of measuring device and measuring the distance just between. Or if you have something, for example, you can go, let's say, for example, my car is 4 fingers, right? But if you want to be precise, get a measuring tape, measure at least side to side, and then front side to side, and make sure that they're level. That'll give you a pretty good indication right off the bat of what you're looking at. So next, you're going to want to visually inspect all your tires. Your tires tell you so much more in the car. So just looking at the tires here, now my tires are in good condition, but just to give you an idea of what you'd be looking at, just get in a better position here, is when you're looking across the tire, you're going to be looking at wear points. So you're going to see if the tire is wearing unusually on one side versus the other side. If there's any unusual like wearing on the inside or the outside. Now that could be also tire pressure, but at the same time, if the suspension is bad, for example, and the car is cambering out, then one side is going to wear out versus the other side. You're also going to be looking for what's called feathering, or when the tire looks like it's essentially dragging on the road. And it's called feathering because it creates like these clips that sometimes could look like a rough idea of kind of feathers or anything like that. It looks like little cuts. And this is because the tire, as it's rolling, as it's moving, it's dragging on the road because its toe is off. And when that's happening, of course, it's causing some wear. So you're going to be looking at that next. So when you're checking your car mounts, the first thing you want to do is just a kind of a general inspection. And that's kind of limited to just looking up here. What you're going to be looking for is any rust or corrosion that's accumulated around here. If the bolts look like they've kind of rusted in and seized, you can see in a comparison these look very clean. Never been done before, but they're clean and in good condition versus being rusted. A lot of corrosion. Look for any cracks around on the mounting surface over here. You're also going to be looking at the center bolt. This is where your strut mounts into. So you're going to be looking in here. You're going to be looking for any damage, any breaks, any cracks. If you're seeing if there's any breaking in here, you're just kind of visually looking it over just with those few pieces. Now, after you've looked everything over, the next thing you're going to do is the infamous noise test, the bounce test. This here is not scientific by any means, but does actually serve a purpose. It works on various suspension components, but what you're really focusing on is jostling the car, bouncing up and down, and looking for any play or any movement within here. So in this case of the Grand Prix, you could just grab here. If you're a big person, maybe give a good go or have someone help you with it. And you're just going to go and you're going to shake the car up and down. And while you're doing that, you're going to be looking for any play or movement within the bolt here, or any movement within these bolts here. Maybe indicate that maybe they're loose or anything like that. Listen for any noise, any grinding, any cracking, anything like that that's going on. I'm going to be turning the wheel. Now, if you don't have someone who can help you with that, then the first two checks will give you a pretty good idea. But if you get someone to help you, right now I've got someone in the car who's going to turn the wheel for me. They turn the wheel and we're going to look for actual movement within here. So we're going to do that right now. And right now we're turning the wheel. As you can see, the wheel is being turned. And as it's turning, we're looking here to see if there's any play. So you're going to be looking right, particularly here at the bolt and this kind of a rubber mount over here. And you'll be looking to see if they move or if they swivel, go left or right, anything. That's really what you're looking for as the car is moving. Once you've done that, if everything checks out and you see everything is not broken, no problems at all, then your mounts are good. The next thing you'll check on your shocks and struts is the bounce test. Of course, the bounce test has been around since forever. And all it really is bouncing the car and checking for the suspension. Now, when you're doing the bounce test on certain components, you're checking for different things. When you're checking for shocks and struts, what you're doing is you're jostling the car. So depending on your car, in this case for the Grand Prix, for the front, I like to hold onto here, move it up and down. For the back, open the trunk and push down on the back of the car. What you're listening for when you're doing, I'll give an example here. See, shaking the car now, is you're listening for a few things. First, you're hearing if there's general noise, creakiness that's coming out from within here. You may actually get some noise from the top and the mounts or in other components, but when it comes to checking the shocks and struts, you're listening first and foremost for any noise that's coming out of here. If the noise all checks out and there's nothing going on, then you're just looking for things like rebound, which is when, for example, now even with these Grand Prix where they're notorious for pogo, especially on the back end, which is when you go over the bump, it kind of still hops a little. Even with that, what you're looking for is consistent. Like, so for example, with the using the front, for example, when I push down, even with the suspension, my current suspension being a little bit worn as it is, it only bounces like once or twice. So, and then it bounces off. Barely moves. Some cars though, if like the shocks are bad, struts are bad, different things will happen. You may get where it'll dip, you push down and one will dip lower than the other. Or it may continue to bounce. It may bounce 4 or 5 times, indicating there's wear in the shocks or struts. Don't also trust to do it on one side versus the other. So if you do it on this side and it's great, don't think automatically the other side will be great too. You're going to want to check both sides because wear can happen in different rates depending on various conditions, components, etc. So you want to be checking all 4 wheels. Same thing with before when I talked about the tires. You want to be checking all 4 tires and you want to be checking all 4 sides of the car. The last thing to do is a visual inspection. Now, depending on your car and depending on the space in between here, you may have to take off the wheel to do this. To do that, though, in this case here, let's say my car now, we won't need to. And I'll just give you an idea. So what you're looking at for the springs is you're checking the springs to see if there's any cracks, breaks, rust, damage. You're checking to see if it's seated. Now there's a seat right here, and you can see, for example, if it's shifted so that it's not balanced between where the boot is right here. It's like moved to one side or the other. That can happen if it comes off its seat. For the strut, you're going to be looking for any, I guess here you can see some rust build up on here. That's not a full indication that's gone bad, but that could happen. But you also be looking for fluid. If it's wet, if it's leaking, that's when the fluid's coming out, the strut fluid is coming out of there, and that'll be an indication that you'll need to change that as well. So you're just kind of looking around, looking up, right up into there. Watch your hands, of course, and be safe, be careful. But you want to check the boot if there's any cracks or anything there. You want to put your fingers in, again, safely, please. Put your hands in and feel if there's any fluid. Sometimes some fluid can leak up and then out through the boot. So you're just going to be looking for things like that. And then beyond that, that should give you a good indication of what's going on.